You don't know what happens behind closed doors until someone brave enough refuses to look away. In a mansion where silence had replaced laughter, billionaire Caleb Monroe returned home in disguise, not as the master, but as a nameless gardener with dirt under his nails and truth in his eyes. His children had stopped calling, their voices had grown hollow, and the woman he'd trusted with their lives had built an empire of fear while he was gone. But someone was watching, someone was listening, someone refused to let cruelty win. This is the story of a father who became invisible to see the truth, a housemaid who risked everything to stand between harm and innocence, and the moment when disguise fell away and justice finally spoke. Stay with me until the end. Like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The hedges were overgrown. Caleb Monroe noticed it first thing when he pulled up to the service entrance in a borrowed pickup truck that smelled like mulch and gasoline. The iron gates that guarded the front of his estate gleamed as they always did, polished and imposing, but back here, where the real work happened, the landscaping had gone to hell. Weeds choked the flower beds. The rose bushes sagged under their own weight. The fountain in the side garden was dry, its basin filled with dead leaves. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, hands still gripping the wheel. This was his home. His money had built it. His name was on the deed. But right now, standing in worn jeans and a faded work shirt with the name Carl stitched over the pocket, he was nobody. Just another laborer hired to fix what had been neglected. That was exactly what he needed to be. Caleb stepped out of the truck, pulling a baseball cap low over his eyes. He'd grown a beard over the past 2 weeks, thick enough to change the shape of his face. Contacts darkened his eyes from blue to brown. He moved differently, too, shoulders slightly hunched, gait slower. He'd practiced it in the mirror until the man staring back at him wasn't Caleb Monroe, tech billionaire and absent father, but Carl Briggs, a hired hand who kept his head down and his mouth shut. He grabbed his tools from the truck bed, pruning shears, a rake, gloves, and walked toward the garden shed near the side of the house. The gravel crunched under his boots. The morning air was cool, damp with the promise of rain. Somewhere inside the mansion, his children were waking up, maybe eating breakfast, maybe getting ready for another day in a house that had stopped feeling like home. He hadn't seen them in 6 weeks. Business had taken him to Singapore, then London, then Dubai. Conference calls that bled into midnight, deals that couldn't wait. Marissa had insisted she could handle things. She'd been so understanding, so supportive. "Go," she'd said. "The kids will be fine. I'll take care of everything." And he'd believed her. Until the calls stopped. At first it was small things. His daughter Lily's voice on the phone sounded flat, distracted. His son Max stopped asking when Daddy was coming home. When Caleb tried to video chat, Marissa was always there, hovering just off camera, her smile bright and reassuring. "They're just tired," she'd say. "You know how kids are." Then 3 weeks ago, Lily's tutor reached out, discreetly, carefully. She mentioned that Lily had seemed withdrawn lately, that she'd stopped participating in lessons, that she flinched when Marissa's voice rose in the hallway. Caleb had brushed it off. Marissa was strict, yes. She believed in discipline, structure. But flinching? He'd tried calling Lily directly. Marissa answered. He'd asked to speak to Max. Marissa said he was napping. He'd requested a family video call. Marissa said the kids were too busy with their new schedules. That was when the first thread of doubt pulled tight in his chest. So he'd done what any desperate father with unlimited resources would do. He'd hired a private investigator. Someone quiet. Someone thorough. Someone who could get eyes inside the house without raising alarms. The report came back in 72 hours. It was worse than he'd imagined. Now, standing in his own garden under a false name, Caleb set down his tools and looked up at the windows of the second floor. Behind one of those panes of glass, his children were living in a nightmare he'd been too blind to see. And Marissa Cole, the woman he'd planned to marry, was the architect of it all. The garden shed smelled like old wood and fertilizer. Caleb stepped inside, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light. Rakes and shovels hung on the walls. Bags of soil were stacked in the corner. A workbench ran along one side, cluttered with pots and hand tools. He set his bag down and pulled out a small black device no bigger than a deck of cards. A voice recorder. He pressed the button on the side, watching the tiny red light blink to life. then slipped it into his shirt pocket. He wasn't here to garden. He was here to gather evidence. The back door to the kitchen opened, and a woman stepped out. She was small, maybe 5'3", with dark hair pulled into a tight bun. She wore a simple gray uniform, housemaid standard issue. Her face was tired but composed, her movements efficient as she carried a plastic bin toward the trash area near the shed. Caleb recognized her from the investigator's report. Elena Cruz, age 28, originally from El Salvador. She'd been working at the estate for 2 years, hired just after Marissa moved in. The report had flagged her for one reason. She was the only staff member who consistently intervened when Marissa's temper flared around the children. Elena didn't see him at first. She set the bin down, opened the trash lid, and started pulling out bags. Her movements were quick, practiced. Then she glanced up and froze. Caleb raised a hand. "Morning." She studied him for a moment, wary. "You're the new gardener?" "That's right, Carl Briggs." He kept his voice flat, unremarkable. "Started today." Elena nodded slowly. "The last one quit 2 weeks ago." "Yeah, I heard the job opened up pretty fast." Caleb picked up the pruning shears, testing the blades. "Guess the estate's been a little short-handed." "You could say that." There was something in her tone, careful, guarded, like she was used to choosing her words in a house where the wrong ones could cost her. Caleb gestured toward the overgrown hedges. "Looks like I've got my work cut out for me." "It's been neglected." Elena hesitated, then added, "Ms. Cole doesn't spend much time worrying about the yard." "Ms. Cole." Caleb let the name sit between them. "That's the lady of the house?" "Yes." "She around much?" "Every day." Elena's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "She's very involved." The way she said it made Caleb's stomach turn. He kept his face neutral. "Good to know. I'll try to stay out of her way." "That's probably smart." Elena picked up the empty bin and turned to go, but then she paused, glancing back at him. "The children like to play near the garden sometimes. In the afternoon. If you see them, just be kind, okay?" Caleb met her eyes. There was something fierce in them, something protective and raw. "I will." She nodded once, then disappeared back into the house. Caleb stood there for a long moment, staring at the door she'd just walked through. The recorder in his pocket was still running, capturing the hum of the morning, the distant sound of birds, the quiet weight of a conversation that had said more than its words. He turned back to the garden and got to work. By mid-morning, the sun had burned through the clouds, and Caleb's shirt was damp with sweat. He'd cleared 2 flower beds and trimmed the hedges along the east side of the property. The work was harder than he'd expected. His hands, used to keyboards and boardrooms, ached from gripping the shears. But he didn't stop, because from where he stood, just outside the kitchen windows, he could see inside. Marissa Cole moved through the house like a director on a stage. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed even at 10 in the morning. She wore a white silk blouse and tailored pants, her hair swept into a perfect chignon. She carried a tablet in one hand, her thumb scrolling as she walked, her expression sharp and controlled. Behind her, trailing at a careful distance, were his children. Caleb's breath caught. Lily was 9 now. She'd grown taller since he'd last seen her, her dark hair longer, pulled into braids that didn't quite match. She wore a pale blue dress that looked too formal for a Tuesday morning at home. Her face was serious, her eyes downcast as she followed Marissa into the dining room. Max was 6, smaller than Lily, quieter. He clutched a stuffed bear to his chest, his steps hesitant. His shirt was buttoned wrong, one side longer than the other, but no one had fixed it. Marissa stopped at the dining table and set down her tablet. She turned to face the children, her hands on her hips. Caleb couldn't hear what she said, but he saw Lily's shoulders stiffen. He saw Max take a small step backward. Then Marissa pointed at the chairs. The children sat. Marissa leaned down, her face close to Lily's, and said something that made the girl's hands clench in her lap. Max stared at his plate, unmoving. Caleb's grip tightened on the shears. Then Elena appeared. She entered the room carrying a tray, 2 small bowls, 2 glasses of juice. She set them on the table in front of the children, her movements careful, deliberate. She didn't look at Marissa. Marissa said something to her, sharp, dismissive. Elena nodded and stepped back, but not before Caleb saw her hand brush Lily's shoulder, just for a second. Just long enough to say, "I'm here." Lily didn't look up, but her fingers unclenched slightly. Marissa turned away, picking up her tablet again, and the children began to eat in silence. Caleb forced himself to turn back to the hedges. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. He pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app. He typed quickly, his jaw tight. 10:47 a.m. Dining room. Children eating breakfast under supervision. Marissa's tone, sharp, controlling. Kids visibly tense, Elena present protective. He saved the note and slipped the phone back into his pocket. This was just the beginning. Lunch came and went. Caleb worked his way around to the western garden where a stone bench sat beneath an old oak tree. From here, he had a clear view of the back terrace and the glass doors that led into the family room. At 2 o'clock, the doors opened. Lily and Max stepped outside. Lily carried a book. Max still had his bear. They moved slowly, like they weren't sure if they were allowed to be there. Marissa appeared behind them, framed in the doorway. She didn't follow them outside. She just stood there, watching, her arms crossed. Lily sat on the bench. Max sat beside her, leaning against her side. Caleb stayed crouched behind a cluster of rose bushes, his shears forgotten in his hand. He watched as Lily opened the book and started to read aloud, her voice too quiet to carry across the yard. Max listened, his thumb in his mouth, a habit Caleb thought he'd outgrown. Then Marissa's voice cut through the air. "Max, take your thumb out of your mouth. You're not a baby." Max jerked his hand away, his eyes wide. "And sit up straight, Lily. You look like a rag doll." Lily straightened immediately, her shoulders going rigid. Marissa stayed in the doorway for another minute, then turned and went back inside. The moment she disappeared, Lily's shoulders sagged. She closed the book and pulled Max closer, wrapping her arm around him. Caleb's throat burned. He wanted to stand up, to walk over there, to tell them he was here, that he'd come back, that he was going to fix this. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not until he had everything. So he stayed where he was, hidden among the roses, and watched his daughter hold his son in the silence their home had become. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Caleb packed up his tools and headed back to the shed. His muscles ached. His hands were blistered, but he'd seen enough to know the investigator's report was just the surface. Marissa Cole wasn't just strict, she was cruel. And she was doing it all in plain sight, behind the walls of a mansion that no one questioned, to children who had no voice. Caleb stepped into the shed and closed the door behind him. He pulled out the recorder and stopped it, then transferred the audio file to his phone. He'd review it tonight, match it with the notes he'd taken, start building the case. But before he could leave, the shed door opened again. Elena stood in the doorway, backlit by the last rays of sunlight. She looked exhausted. "You're still here," she said quietly. "Just finishing up?" She stepped inside and closed the door. For a moment, she just stood there, her arms crossed, her gaze sharp and searching. "You're not really a gardener, are you?" Caleb went still. Elena's voice was steady. "You move wrong. You hold the tools wrong. And you watch the house like someone who's looking for something." Caleb didn't answer. Elena took a step closer. "I don't know who you are, but if you're here to hurt those kids, I swear to God, I'm not." Caleb's voice came out rougher than he intended. He met her eyes. "I'm here to help them." Elena studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Good. Because someone needs to." "What's she doing to them?" Caleb asked, his voice low. "Tell me." Elena's jaw tightened. "Everything she can get away with." "Like what?" "She controls what they eat, when they sleep, what they say. She punishes them for anything she decides is wrong: spilled juice, wrinkled clothes, talking too loud. She doesn't hit them. She doesn't have to. She just breaks them down, piece by piece." Caleb's fists clenched. "And the staff?" he asked. "Most of them don't see it, or they don't want to. The ones who do—" Elena paused. "The last housekeeper who tried to say something got fired the same day." "But you're still here." "Because those kids need someone." Elena's voice cracked, just slightly. Someone who won't walk away. Caleb looked at her, this small, tired woman who'd risked her job, her livelihood, maybe more, to stand between his children and the woman who was supposed to love them. "Thank you," he said quietly. Elena shook her head. "Don't thank me yet. Just do whatever you came here to do, and do it fast, because I don't know how much longer they can take this." She turned and left, the door swinging shut behind her. Caleb stood alone in the shed, his heart hammering, his mind racing. He had a plan, but now he had something more. He had an ally. Young. That night, Caleb sat in a cheap motel room 20 miles from the estate. His laptop was open on the bed, the audio files from the day playing through his headphones. He listened to Marissa's voice, cold, controlled, cutting. He listened to the silence that followed her orders. He listened to the small, fragile sounds of his children trying to stay invisible. And he took notes. Every word, every moment, every piece of evidence. Tomorrow, he'd go back. He'd work the garden, keep his head down, stay invisible. But he'd also keep watching, keep recording, keep building the case that would bring Marissa Cole's perfect facade crashing down. Because he wasn't just a gardener anymore. He was a father who'd finally opened his eyes. And this time, he wasn't looking away. Morning came too fast. Caleb was back at the estate by 7, the truck rattling up the service road as the first light touched the tops of the trees. He parked in the same spot, grabbed his tools, and headed for the shed. But today was different. Today, he had a target. The investigator's report had mentioned Marissa's office, a converted study on the first floor where she handled the estate's finances, managed the staff, and made most of her calls. If there was anything in writing, emails, texts, records of her interactions with the children, it would be there. Caleb couldn't get inside, not yet, but he could get close. He spent the morning working the flower beds near the study windows, his hands moving automatically while his eyes tracked movement inside. Marissa was on the phone for most of the morning, pacing back and forth, her expression sharp. She gestured as she spoke, her voice muffled by the glass but unmistakably authoritative. At 11, she ended the call and sat down at her desk. She opened her laptop and started typing, her fingers moving fast. Caleb edged closer, angling himself so he could see the screen's reflection in the window. He couldn't make out the words, but he saw enough to know she was writing an email. Something long. Something important. Then the study door opened and Lily walked in. Caleb's breath stopped. Lily stood just inside the doorway, her hands clasped in front of her, her head slightly bowed. She was wearing the same blue dress from yesterday, but it looked wrinkled now, like she'd slept in it. Marissa didn't look up. "What do you want?" I finished my reading. And? I thought maybe I could go outside." Marissa stopped typing. She turned in her chair, her eyes cold. "You thought?" Lily's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I'm sorry. I meant, may I go outside?" "Did you clean your room?" "Yes." "Did you make your bed correctly this time?" "Yes." "Did you put your books back on the shelf in alphabetical order like I told you?" Lily hesitated. I think so." Marissa stood. "You think so?" "I mean, yes. Yes, I did." Marissa walked toward her, slow and deliberate. Lily didn't move, but Caleb saw her hands start to tremble. "Go back upstairs," Marissa said softly. "Check your room. If anything is out of place, you'll stay inside for the rest of the day. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "And Lily," the girl looked up, her eyes wide. "Next time, don't waste my time with stupid questions." Lily's face crumpled, but she didn't cry. She just nodded and turned, walking quickly out of the room. Caleb's vision blurred red. He forced himself to breathe, to stay still, to keep his cover. But inside, something broke. Lunchtime was worse. The children ate in the kitchen this time, seated at a small table near the window. Elena served them. Soup and crackers, nothing more. The portions were small, too small. Max stared at his bowl but didn't eat. His bear sat in his lap. Marissa entered the kitchen, her heels clicking on the tile. She glanced at the table, then at Elena. "Is that all you're giving them?" Elena kept her voice neutral. "It's what you said to prepare, ma'am." I said soup. I didn't say one bowl. There's more in the pot if they'd like seconds. They won't need seconds if they eat what's in front of them. Marissa turned to Max. Why aren't you eating? Max didn't answer. He just stared at the bowl. Max, Marissa's voice sharpened. I asked you a question. I'm not hungry, Max whispered. That's not an option. Eat. Max picked up his spoon with trembling hands. He dipped it into the soup, brought it to his mouth, and swallowed. His face twisted. Is there a problem? Marissa asked. Max shook his head quickly. Then eat. All of it. Lily reached over and touched Max's arm. It's okay, she whispered. Just eat it fast. Marissa's gaze snapped to her. Did I ask you to speak? Lily pulled her hand back. No, ma'am. Then be quiet. The children ate in silence. Max forced down every spoonful, his face pale. Lily finished hers quickly, her eyes down. When they were done, Marissa inspected the bowls. Good. Now go upstairs. I don't want to see you again until dinner. They left without a word. Elena started clearing the table, her movements tight with suppressed anger. Marissa watched her for a moment. You know, Elena, you coddle them. Elena didn't look up. I'm just doing my job, ma'am. Your job is to serve this household, not to mother children who already have everything they need. Yes, ma'am. Marissa left the kitchen, and the door swung shut behind her. Elena stood there, gripping the edge of the sink, her knuckles white. Caleb, still outside the window, pulled out his phone and added another note. 12:34 p.m., kitchen. Marissa forced Max to eat despite him saying he wasn't hungry, criticized Elena for coddling, children sent to their rooms. He saved it. His hands were shaking. This wasn't discipline. This was control. And it was getting worse. The afternoon brought rain. Caleb worked under the eaves of the shed, sorting tools and pretending to organize supplies. The children didn't come outside. The house was quiet, the windows dark. At 4 o'clock, a car pulled up to the front entrance. Caleb watched from a distance as a woman in a business suit stepped out. Mid-50s, gray hair, sharp eyes. She carried a leather briefcase. The front door opened and Marissa greeted her with a bright smile. Caroline, so good to see you. They disappeared inside. Caleb pulled out his phone and did a quick search. Caroline Winters, attorney, specialized in estate planning and family law. His pulse quickened. Why was Marissa meeting with a lawyer? He moved closer to the house, staying low, using the rain as cover. He circled around to the side where the study windows faced the garden. Inside, Marissa and Caroline sat across from each other, papers spread on the desk between them. Caleb couldn't hear the conversation, but he could see Marissa's expression, calm, confident, in control. Caroline said something, and Marissa nodded. She signed a document, then another. Caleb's stomach dropped. He pulled out his phone and took a series of photos through the window. Marissa, the lawyer, the documents. He couldn't see what they said, but he didn't need to. Whatever Marissa was planning, it was official, and it was happening now. That night, back at the motel, Caleb couldn't sleep. He reviewed the photos, the notes, the recordings. He built a timeline. He mapped Marissa's patterns, when she was harshest, when she let her guard down, when the children were most vulnerable. And he thought about Elena. She was risking everything. She had no obligation to these kids, no connection to them beyond the paycheck she earned cleaning their home. But she stayed. She intervened. She protected them when no one else would. Caleb respected that. More than that, he needed her. Because tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tomorrow, he'd start pushing. Tomorrow, he'd make Marissa show her true face. And when she did, he'd be ready. The rain continued through the night and into the next morning, turning the garden paths to mud and filling the air with the smell of wet earth. Caleb arrived before dawn, his clothes already damp by the time he reached the shed. He'd barely slept. His mind had been too full of images, of Marissa's cold smile and his children's frightened faces, of legal documents he couldn't read and patterns he was only beginning to understand. He set up his tools with deliberate care, positioning himself near the kitchen windows where he'd have the clearest view of the morning routine. The recorder in his pocket was already running. His phone was charged and ready. Every moment now was evidence. Every word mattered. At 6:30, lights flickered on in the kitchen. Elena appeared first, moving through the space with quiet efficiency. She started the coffee maker, pulled ingredients from the refrigerator, began preparing breakfast. Her movements were practiced, economical, but Caleb noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing toward the hallway. 10 minutes later, Marissa entered. She was already dressed for the day in a cream-colored pantsuit, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. She poured herself coffee and checked her phone, scrolling with one manicured finger while Elena worked silently at the stove. "The children will eat oatmeal this morning," Marissa said without looking up. "Plain. No sugar." Elena's hand paused over the honey jar. "Yes, ma'am." "And make sure Max finishes every bite. He's been difficult about food lately." "He's 6 years old, ma'am. Sometimes children—" "I didn't ask for your opinion, Elena." Marissa's tone was pleasant, conversational, but there was steel underneath. "I asked you to make sure he eats." Elena set down the honey jar. "Of course." Marissa finally looked up from her phone, her eyes sharp as they swept over Elena's face. "You know, I've been thinking. The children are getting too attached to you. It's not healthy." Elena went very still. "Ma'am?" "They need to learn independence, self-reliance. Having you constantly hovering, comforting them every time they face the slightest challenge, it's making them weak." "I'm just trying to help them adjust. Mr. Monroe has been away for a long time, and Mr. Monroe left me in charge." Marissa's voice went cold. "And I'm telling you that your help isn't needed. Do your job, clean the house, prepare the meals, but stop inserting yourself into their emotional lives. Do you understand?" Elena's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Good." Marissa took another sip of coffee. "Now bring the children down for breakfast. And Elena, if I catch you giving them extra food or sneaking them snacks or doing any of the other little things you think I don't notice, you'll be looking for a new job. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, ma'am," Marissa smiled. "Wonderful." From his position outside the window, Caleb felt rage flood through him like poison. His hands clenched around the pruning shears so hard his knuckles went white. He wanted to storm inside, to grab Marissa by her perfect hair and drag her out of his house, away from his children, away from the woman who was protecting them when he couldn't. But he forced himself to breathe, to stay still, to keep recording. This was what he'd come for, the mask slipping, the cruelty showing through. He just needed more. Elena left the kitchen, and Marissa returned to her phone. A few minutes later, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Lily appeared first, holding Max's hand. They were both already dressed, Lily in another too formal dress, this one pale yellow, and Max in khaki pants and a button-down shirt that looked uncomfortable on his small frame. They entered the kitchen silently and took their seats at the table. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them looked at Marissa. Elena returned and set 2 bowls of oatmeal in front of them, plain, gray, thick. No fruit, no honey, just oatmeal and water. Max stared at his bowl like it was full of mud. Marissa set down her phone. "Good morning, children." "Good morning, Ms. Cole," they said in unison, their voices flat. "Lily, what do you have scheduled today?" "Math tutoring at 9, piano practice at 11, reading until lunch." "And Max?" Max's voice was barely a whisper. "Art class. Then spelling practice." "Good." Marissa stood and walked to the table, looking down at them like a general inspecting troops. "I expect perfect behavior today. No whining, no complaining, no asking for things you don't need. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," Lily said. Max nodded, his eyes still on his bowl. "Max, I expect verbal confirmation when I ask you a question." "Yes, ma'am," Max whispered, louder. "Yes, ma'am." His voice cracked slightly. Marissa smiled. "Better. Now eat your breakfast. You have 15 minutes." She left the kitchen, her heels clicking away down the hall. The moment she was gone, Lily reached over and squeezed Max's hand under the table. "Just eat it fast," she whispered. "Like we practiced." Max picked up his spoon with trembling hands. He took a bite, swallowed, grimaced, took another bite. Lily ate mechanically, her eyes distant, like she'd learned to detach herself from the experience. Elena stood at the sink with her back to them, her shoulders rigid, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. Caleb watched it all, recorded it all. his heart breaking with every forced swallow, every silent moment of endurance. When the children finished, Elena cleared their bowls without a word. They stood, still silent, and left the kitchen like ghosts. Elena waited until their footsteps faded on the stairs. Then she braced both hands on the counter and let her head drop forward, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Caleb saw the exact moment she decided not to cry. She straightened, wiped her hands on her apron, and went back to work. The morning stretched long and gray. Caleb moved from the kitchen side of the house to the eastern gardens, where the children's playroom windows overlooked a small courtyard. He pruned dead branches from the ornamental trees, his movements slow and methodical, his attention focused entirely on the windows above. At 9 o'clock, a woman in her 50s arrived, the math tutor. She was escorted to the playroom by Marissa, who lingered in the doorway for a moment before leaving. Caleb watched Lily sit at a small desk, her back straight, her hands folded. The tutor opened a textbook and began the lesson. Everything looked normal, appropriate, exactly what a wealthy child's education should look like. But Caleb knew better now. He knew what happened when the tutors left, when the doors closed, when there were no witnesses. An hour later, the tutor descended the stairs and left through the front entrance. Marissa immediately went upstairs. Caleb moved closer to the building, using a ladder against the side wall as an excuse to get within earshot of the open playroom window. "Show me your work." Marissa's voice drifted down. There was a rustling of papers, then silence. "This is wrong." I'm sorry, I thought." "You thought wrong. Do it again." "Yes, ma'am." More silence. Then the sound of pencil on paper, frantic and desperate. "Still wrong. Are you even trying, Lily?" "I am. I promise. Just what? Just don't care? Just think you're too special to follow simple instructions?" "No, ma'am. The sound of paper tearing. "Start over. And this time, if you get it wrong, you'll spend the afternoon in your room with no books, no toys, nothing. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." Lily's voice was thick with unshed tears. Marissa's footsteps moved toward the door. "You have 1 hour." She left. The door closed. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Caleb heard it, the small, choked sound of a child crying alone. He climbed down from the ladder, walked into the shadows of the garden shed, and put his fist through the wooden wall. The pain was immediate and clarifying. He looked down at his split knuckles, at the blood welling up, and felt nothing but a cold, crystalline fury. He wrapped his hand in an old rag from the workbench, pulled out his phone, and added another entry to his notes. 9:47 a.m., playroom. Marissa verbally abused Lily for incorrect math work, threatened isolation as punishment, child crying alone after Marissa left. He saved it and went back to work. Lunch was a repeat of breakfast. Small portions, silent children, Marissa's watchful presence turning a simple meal into an exercise in controlled misery. Max ate 3 bites of his sandwich before Marissa told him he was excused. He looked confused. There was still food on his plate, but he didn't argue. He just stood and left, his bear clutched to his chest. Lily ate everything put in front of her without expression. After the children were dismissed, Marissa lingered in the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of wine, even though it was barely past noon, and stood at the window overlooking the garden. Caleb was 30 feet away, trimming the rose bushes. He kept his head down, his movement steady. Elena entered to clear the table. She worked in silence, stacking plates, wiping surfaces. "Elena?" Marissa said without turning around. "Yes, ma'am." "How long have you worked here?" 2 years, ma'am." "And in that time, have you ever questioned my authority?" Elena's hand stilled on the plate she was holding. "No, ma'am." "Really?" Marissa turned, her expression thoughtful. "Because it seems to me that you question me quite often. Not with words, perhaps, but with looks, little gestures, the way you hover around the children like I'm some kind of monster." "I don't think that, ma'am." "Don't you?" Marissa took a sip of wine. "You know, I could fire you right now. I could call an agency and have someone new here by tomorrow, someone who understands boundaries, someone who doesn't think they know better than me." Elena met her gaze steadily. "If that's what you want, ma'am, I understand." But you see, that would be inconvenient. The children are used to you, and I don't like inconvenience. Marissa set down her glass. So instead, I'm going to make something very clear. This is my house now. Those are my children. And you're just the help. Act like it. Yes, ma'am. Good. Marissa picked up her wine and left the kitchen. Elena stood there for a long moment, the plate still in her hands. Then she set it down carefully, walked to the back door, and stepped outside. She didn't see Caleb at first. She just stood on the small patio, her arms wrapped around herself, her breath coming fast and uneven like she was trying not to scream. Caleb straightened slowly, deliberately making noise with the shears so she'd know someone was there. Elena's head snapped around. When she saw him, her expression shuddered immediately, going blank and careful. Sorry, Caleb said, keeping his voice neutral. Didn't mean to startle you. It's fine. Elena's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. You okay? I'm fine. Caleb set down the shears and walked closer, staying in the open where anyone looking out a window could see them. Just a gardener and a maid having a brief conversation. Nothing suspicious. She's something else, isn't she? He said quietly. Elena's jaw tightened. I shouldn't talk about this. Maybe not, but sometimes it helps. Elena looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Then she glanced back at the house, checking the windows. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. She wasn't always like this. When she first came, she was different. Charming, kind even. The kids loved her. Mr. Monroe was so happy. Elena's hands clenched into fists. But the moment he left for that first business trip, everything changed. It was like she'd been wearing a mask, and the second he was gone, she took it off. What did she do? Small things at first, stricter rules, less freedom. She said it was for their own good, that they needed structure. But it got worse. She started controlling everything, what they ate, what they wore, when they could speak, when they could breathe. Elena's voice broke slightly. And the kids, they just learned to adapt, to survive. Did you tell anyone? I tried. I called Mr. Monroe's assistant. I sent an email to his business manager. I even contacted the company's HR department. Elena laughed bitterly. You know what happened? Marissa found out. She said I was making up stories because I was jealous of her relationship with the children. She said I was unstable, and suddenly everyone believed her instead of me. But you stayed. Of course I stayed. Who else is going to protect them? Elena wiped her eyes angrily. I know I'm just the maid. I know I have no real power here. But I can be there when she goes too far. I can feed them when she starves them. I can tell them they're good kids when she tells them they're worthless. It's not much, but it's something. Caleb felt his throat tighten. This woman, this underpaid, overworked, overlooked woman, had more courage than anyone else in his children's lives. You're more than just the maid, he said quietly. Elena met his eyes. Then what am I? You're the person who stayed when everyone else walked away. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. I should get back inside. Elena. She looked at him. Thank you, Caleb said, for being there, for caring, for not giving up on them. Elena nodded once, then turned and walked back into the house. Caleb stood alone in the garden, his damaged hand throbbing, his mind racing. He had everything he needed now. The recordings, the notes, the testimony from someone who'd witnessed it all. But he needed one more thing. He needed Marissa to lose control completely. And he had an idea of exactly how to make that happen. That evening, as the sun began to set, Caleb finished his work and headed toward the shed. He was dirty, exhausted, his hand wrapped in a makeshift bandage. He looked exactly like what he was supposed to be, a working man at the end of a long day. But as he passed the side entrance to the house, he heard voices. Marissa's voice, sharp and angry, and a man's voice, calm, professional. Caleb slowed his steps, moving closer to the partially open window. Don't care what his assistant said. I'm handling things perfectly well. Ms. Cole, Mr. Monroe asked me to check on the children personally. It's not a reflection on you. Of course it is. He doesn't trust me. After everything I've done, everything I've given up to be here, he still doesn't trust me. That's not what I said. Get out. Now. And you can tell Caleb that if he has concerns, he can come home and handle them himself instead of sending lackeys to spy on me." There was a pause, then footsteps. The front door opened and closed. Caleb waited until he heard Marissa's heels clicking away down the hall. Then he quickly circled to the front of the house. A man in a dark suit was walking toward a black sedan parked in the driveway. Michael Grant, Caleb's personal attorney and longtime friend. Caleb pulled off his baseball cap and stepped into Michael's path. Michael froze. His eyes went wide. "Caleb? What the hell? Why do you look like—" "Not here," Caleb said quietly. "Drive to the coffee shop 2 miles down the road. The one with the green awning. I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. "But 20 minutes, Mike, and don't tell anyone you saw me." Michael nodded slowly, his expression bewildered, and got into his car. Caleb watched him drive away, then walked back to his truck. He peeled off the work gloves, pulled off the hat, scrubbed a hand over his bearded face. His whole body ached. His hand throbbed. His heart felt like it was being crushed in a vice. But he'd just gotten the confirmation he needed. Marissa knew Caleb was starting to question things, which meant she was getting nervous, which meant she was going to get more aggressive. And when she did, he'd be ready. The coffee shop was nearly empty when Caleb arrived. Michael was already there, sitting in a corner booth with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He stood when he saw Caleb approach, his face a mixture of relief and confusion. "Jesus Christ, Caleb, what are you doing? Why are you dressed like that? And what happened to your hand?" Caleb slid into the booth. "How much do you know about what's going on at my house?" "What do you mean?" "With Marissa. With my kids." Michael frowned. "I know you've been traveling a lot. I know Marissa's been managing the household. Why? What's wrong?" "Everything." Caleb pulled out his phone and opened the folder where he'd been collecting notes and recordings. "I need you to listen to something, and I need you to keep an open mind." For the next 40 minutes, Caleb played the recordings. He showed Michael the photos. He laid out everything he'd witnessed over the past 3 days, every moment of cruelty, every act of control, every instance of emotional abuse. Michael's expression shifted from skepticism to shock to horror. When Caleb finished, Michael sat back in his seat, his face pale. Caleb, this is serious. We need to call the police. We need to..." "No." "What do you mean, no? If we call the police right now, what happens? They show up, they interview Marissa, she tells them I'm a paranoid absentee father trying to interfere with her authority. She shows them the children's tutors, their schedules, their clean rooms, and full closets. She makes it look like I'm the problem." Caleb's voice was hard. "And while they're investigating, while they're sorting through claims and counterclaims, my kids are still in that house with her. So what are you suggesting?" "I need more. I need her to lose control in front of witnesses. I need undeniable evidence that what she's doing is abuse, not discipline." Caleb leaned forward. "And I need you to help me." "How?" "You just tried to do a welfare check on my kids, right?" "Yes, on your behalf. And she threw you out." "She was very hostile." "Good. That means she's rattled." Caleb's eyes were sharp, focused. "I want you to file an official request with Family Services. Tell them there are concerns about the children's welfare. Tell them you represent their father and you're requesting a home inspection. That will take days to process, maybe weeks." "I know, but it will put pressure on Marissa. She'll know people are watching, and when people start watching, she'll make mistakes." Caleb's hand clenched on the table. "I just need her to make one big enough that I can stop her permanently." Michael was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay, I'll file the request first thing tomorrow morning, but Caleb, you need to be careful. If she finds out you're there, if she realizes what you're doing, she won't. You can't guarantee that. I can guarantee that I'm not leaving my kids in that house 1 second longer than I have to." Caleb's voice was steel. "So file the request, put the pressure on, and trust me to handle the rest." Michael reached across the table and gripped Caleb's shoulder. "You're a good father, you know that, right?" Caleb's throat tightened. "A good father wouldn't have let this happen in the first place. A good father is fixing it now." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Caleb stood. "I need to get back before someone notices the gardener's been gone too long." "Caleb." He looked back. Be careful, Michael said quietly. Please. Caleb nodded once, then walked out into the night. He drove back to the estate slowly, his mind churning. The pressure was building. Michael would file the request tomorrow. Marissa would find out within days, maybe hours. She'd panic. She'd tighten her control. And she'd make a mistake. Caleb just had to be there when she did. He parked the truck behind the shed and sat for a moment in the darkness. The house was lit up like a museum, every window glowing. Somewhere inside, his children were going to bed, brushing their teeth, putting on pajamas, maybe reading for a few minutes before lights out, all under the watchful eye of a woman who saw them as possessions to control, not people to love. Caleb's damaged hand throbbed. He looked down at the bandage, at the blood that had seeped through the fabric. He thought about Lily crying alone in the playroom. He thought about Max forcing down food he didn't want. He thought about Elena standing in the kitchen, shaking with suppressed rage and helplessness. And he made a decision. Tomorrow he wouldn't just watch. Tomorrow he'd push. Tomorrow he'd give Marissa a reason to show everyone exactly who she really was. He got out of the truck, locked it, and walked into the darkness between the trees. The night air was cold and clean. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Caleb stood there for a long time, listening to the silence, gathering his strength. Then he walked back toward the house, toward his children, toward the confrontation he knew was coming. The gardener was about to disappear, and the father was about to return. But the night came first, and with it, one more thing Caleb hadn't expected to witness. He'd been about to leave, to drive back to the motel and prepare for tomorrow's confrontation, when he saw a light flicker on in one of the upstairs windows. Max's room. It was nearly 10 o'clock, well past the children's bedtime, according to the schedule he'd found in Marissa's office notes. Caleb moved closer to the house, staying in the shadows of the garden. He positioned himself beneath a large oak tree that gave him a clear view of the second floor. The window was partially open, and voices drifted down through the cool night air. Marissa's voice, tight with irritation. I told you to stay in bed. I can't sleep. Max's voice was so small, so frightened. That's not my problem. Get back in bed. Now. But I'm scared. Scared of what? There's nothing in this room but you and your ridiculous stuffed animals. I had a bad dream about Daddy. I want to call him. There was a long pause. Then Marissa laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that made Caleb's blood run ice cold. Your daddy doesn't want to talk to you right now, Max. He's very busy with important things. Much more important than a little boy who can't even sleep through the night without crying. That's not true. Daddy loves me. Does he? Then where is he? Why hasn't he come home? Why does he keep choosing his work over you? Marissa's voice dropped to something almost gentle, almost kind, which somehow made it worse. I think you need to face the truth, sweetheart. Your daddy doesn't care as much as you think he does. Stop it, Max's voice broke. Stop saying that. I'm only telling you what you need to hear. The sooner you accept it, the easier things will be. I want Elena. Elena is not your mother. I am the one taking care of you. I am the one who's here every single day while your father gallivants around the world. And this is the thanks I get? A whining, ungrateful child who can't even appreciate what I do for him? I'm sorry. Max was crying now, full sobs that carried through the open window. I'm sorry. I'll be good. I promise. It's too late for promises. You've disrupted the entire household with your nonsense. Tomorrow you'll spend the day in your room. No art class, no playtime, no anything. Maybe that will teach you to control yourself. Please, enough. I don't want to hear another word from you tonight. Not one sound. Do you understand me? There was a muffled response, then the sound of a door closing. The light in Max's room stayed on for a few more minutes. Caleb could see his son's small silhouette moving around the room, could imagine him clutching his bear, trying to muffle his sobs in his pillow. Then the light went out, and Max was alone in the darkness. Caleb stood beneath the tree, his fists clenched so hard his nails drew blood from his palms. The recording device in his pocket had captured every word, every lie Marissa had fed his son about him, every moment of psychological torture disguised as discipline. He wanted to climb through that window right now. He wanted to hold his son and tell him that none of it was true, that Daddy did love him, that Daddy was here and would never leave him again. But he couldn't. Not yet. So instead, he stood in the garden beneath his son's window and made a silent promise. Tomorrow, this would end. Tomorrow, Marissa Cole would finally face consequences. Tomorrow, his children would be free. He walked back to his truck on legs that felt like lead, drove to the motel without remembering the journey, and spent the night staring at the ceiling while rage and guilt warred in his chest. When dawn came, he was already awake, already dressed, already ready. Today was the day everything changed. Boy. The morning air was crisp and cool when Caleb arrived at the estate for what he knew would be his last day as Carl Briggs, invisible gardener. He parked the truck in the usual spot, but this time he didn't grab his tools right away. Instead, he sat for a moment, centering himself, preparing for what was coming. His phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Request filed with Family Services. They'll contact the household within 48 hours for preliminary interview. Expect Marissa to receive notification by end of day. Caleb typed back. Perfect. Stay on standby. He pocketed the phone and got out of the truck. The recorder was already running. His phone was charged and ready to capture photo and video evidence. He'd worn a shirt with a chest pocket specifically designed to hide a small camera lens he'd purchased the night before. Untraceable, high quality, positioned to capture whatever happened at eye level. Everything was in place. Now he just needed Marissa to do what he knew she would do when cornered, lash out. He started his morning work near the kitchen windows as usual. Inside, Elena was preparing breakfast. The children came down at 7:30, both of them moving like ghosts. Max's eyes were red and swollen from crying. Lily held his hand tightly, her face set in that carefully blank expression she'd perfected over the past weeks. Marissa appeared 10 minutes later, already on her phone, already agitated. She paced the kitchen while the children ate their plain oatmeal in silence, her free hand gesturing sharply as she spoke to whoever was on the other end of the call. I don't care what he thinks. I'm doing exactly what he asked me to do. I'm managing this household and raising these children properly. Her voice was rising. If he has a problem with my methods, he can come home and deal with it himself instead of sending his lawyer to harass me. She listened for a moment, her face darkening. That's ridiculous. There are no concerns about the children's welfare. They're perfectly fine, better than fine. They're thriving under proper structure and discipline. She paused. No, I will not agree to any kind of inspection. This is a private home, and I have full authority here. If Caleb wants to question that authority, he can… What? What do you mean there's already a request filed? Marissa stopped pacing. Her knuckles went white around the phone. When? She listened, her breathing getting faster. Today? No, that's impossible. I need more time. I need to… Fine. Send me the details. She ended the call and stood motionless in the middle of the kitchen, her chest heaving, her carefully constructed composure cracking at the edges. Elena, who had been washing dishes at the sink, glanced over. Ma'am, is everything all right? Marissa's head snapped toward her. Did I ask you to speak? No, ma'am, I just… Then be quiet and do your job. Elena turned back to the sink without another word. Marissa looked at the children, who were both staring down at their bowls, trying to be invisible. Her eyes narrowed. Lily, Max, finish your breakfast and go to your rooms. Stay there until I come to get you. But I have tutoring at 9, Lily said softly. I said go to your rooms. Now. The children stood immediately and left without arguing. Caleb watched them climb the stairs, their shoulders hunched, their steps quick and fearful. The moment they were gone, Marissa turned to Elena. I need you to clean the children's rooms, top to bottom. Make sure everything is perfect. Beds made military tight, toys organized, not a single item out of place. We're having visitors today. Visitors, ma'am? Family Services. Apparently someone has raised concerns about the children's welfare. Marissa's voice dripped with contempt. Concerns? As if I haven't given up everything to care for those ungrateful kids while their father ignores them. Elena's hand stilled in the dishwater. Family Services is coming here? Yes, which means everything needs to be perfect. The house needs to be spotless. The children need to look happy and well cared for. And you You need to keep your mouth shut about anything you think you've seen. Do you understand? Elena turned slowly, meeting Marissa's gaze. What have I seen, ma'am? Don't play games with me, Elena. I know you have opinions about how I run this household. I know you think you could do better. But if you say one word to those investigators, one single word that makes me look bad, I will destroy you. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. I'll tell everyone you were stealing from us, that you were inappropriate with the children, that you were unstable and vindictive. Marissa stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. I have money. I have connections. I have power. And you're just a maid who's here illegally. I have a work visa, ma'am. Do you? Are you sure? Because I could make some calls. I could have that checked. I could make things very difficult for you and your family back in El Salvador. Elena's face went pale, but she didn't look away. Is that a threat? It's a promise. So when those investigators come, you smile. You tell them the children are well cared for. You tell them I'm a wonderful guardian. And then maybe you get to keep your job and your visa and your nice, quiet life. Marissa smiled coldly. Are we clear? Elena's jaw tightened. Crystal clear, ma'am. Good. Now get upstairs and clean those rooms. I want this house perfect in 2 hours. Elena dried her hands and left the kitchen. Marissa pulled out her phone and made another call, her voice shifting back to smooth and professional as she began damage control. Outside the window, Caleb had heard every word. The camera in his pocket had captured every moment. The recorder had preserved every threat. It was enough to support Elena's testimony, enough to show a pattern of manipulation and control. But it wasn't enough to guarantee his children's safety. He needed more. He needed Marissa to break completely. And he had an idea of exactly how to make that happen. Well, Caleb waited until Marissa was deep in conversation on her phone. Then he circled around to the side entrance of the house, the one used by maintenance staff. He'd studied the security system over the past few days and knew that this entrance wasn't monitored by cameras. The door was locked, but he had a key. He'd copied it from Elena's ring 2 days ago when she'd set it down while working in the garden. He slipped inside quietly, moving through the back hallways that the staff used, staying away from the main areas where Marissa might spot him. He could hear her voice echoing from the front of the house, still on the phone, still trying to control the narrative. He climbed the servants' staircase to the second floor and moved down the hallway toward the children's rooms. Elena was in Lily's room, making the bed with sharp, angry movements. She looked up when Caleb appeared in the doorway and nearly dropped the pillow she was holding. What are you? You can't be up here, she hissed. If Marissa sees you, she won't. She's on the phone downstairs. Caleb stepped into the room and closed the door partially behind him. I need to ask you something. Now? Are you crazy? When family services comes today, are you going to tell them the truth? Elena's face went tight. You heard what she said to me. I heard her threaten you. I also heard you stand up to her. Standing up to her and destroying my life are two different things. Elena sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. You don't understand. I send money to my mother and my sisters back home. They depend on me. If I lose this job, if she ruins my reputation, if she makes trouble with my visa, I can't. I just can't. Caleb crouched down in front of her, his voice gentle but urgent. Elena, those kids need you to be brave one more time. I've been brave. Every single day I've been brave, but there's a limit to what one person can do. I know, and I'm not asking you to do this alone. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, Michael's card. This is my attorney. When family services comes, if you tell them the truth about what you've seen, he'll protect you. He'll make sure you keep your job, your visa, everything. Marissa won't be able to touch you. Elena stared at the card. Your attorney? Who are you? Someone who cares about those kids as much as you do. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now, but Elena... He waited until she met his eyes. You've already risked everything to protect them. Don't stop now, not when we're this close to getting them out. Elena took the card with trembling fingers. If I do this, if I tell them everything, she'll know it was me. She'll know it was both of us, because I'm going to make sure she can't hide anymore. How? Caleb stood. By being there when she finally loses control. And she will. Probably within the next few hours. When she does, I need you to make sure the children are safe. Get them out of the room, away from her, whatever it takes. Can you do that? Elena was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. I can do that. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have to survive today. Caleb slipped out of the room as quietly as he'd entered. He made his way back down the servants' staircase and out the side entrance, his heart pounding. He'd just committed to a plan that could either save his children or blow up in his face spectacularly. But he was out of time for caution. He was out of patience for strategy. He was just a father who needed his kids safe, and he'd do whatever it took to make that happen. Yeen. The family services investigators arrived at 11 o'clock. Two of them, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a younger man carrying a tablet for taking notes. Caleb watched from the garden as Marissa greeted them at the front door, her smile bright and welcoming, her entire demeanor transformed into the perfect picture of a gracious guardian. Please, come in. I'm so glad you're here. I want to cooperate fully with any concerns about the children's welfare. Her voice was warm, friendly, completely different from the cold venom she'd wielded just hours before. The investigators followed her inside, and the door closed. Caleb moved closer to the house, positioning himself near the living room windows where he knew Marissa would conduct the interview. He knelt beside a flower bed, apparently weeding, but his attention was entirely focused on the conversation happening inside. Through the window, he could see Marissa sitting gracefully on the sofa, the investigators across from her in matching armchairs. The woman was speaking, though Caleb couldn't hear the words. Marissa nodded thoughtfully, her expression concerned and cooperative. Of course I understand why you're here, Marissa was saying, her voice carrying through the partially open window. Caleb, Mr. Monroe, has been under tremendous stress lately. His business is expanding internationally, and I think he's feeling guilty about being away so much. I've tried to reassure him that the children are thriving, but I understand a father's worry. The female investigator made a note. We'd like to speak with the children directly if that's all right. Absolutely. They're upstairs doing their lessons. I'll have them come down. Marissa stood and called toward the hallway. Elena, please bring Lily and Max to the living room. A few minutes later, Elena appeared with the children. They were both dressed impeccably, Lily in a soft pink dress, Max in neat khakis and a collared shirt. Their hair was brushed, their faces clean. They looked like perfect, well-cared-for children. But Caleb could see the tension in Lily's shoulders, the fear in Max's eyes, the way they both stood too still, too careful, like they were afraid of breaking something invisible. The male investigator smiled at them. Hi, Lily. Hi, Max. My name is David, and this is my colleague, Sarah. We just want to ask you a few questions about how things are going at home. Is that okay? Lily nodded. Max clutched his bear tighter. Do you like living here? Sarah asked gently. Yes, ma'am, Lily said. Her voice was clear, steady, well-rehearsed. What's your favorite thing about being here? Lily glanced quickly at Marissa, who was sitting nearby with an encouraging smile. I like my lessons, and my room is very nice. What about you, Max? What do you like? Max's voice was barely a whisper. I like art class. That's wonderful. Do you get to do art class often? Sometimes. Sarah leaned forward slightly. Max, do you feel safe here? There was a pause, just the briefest hesitation. Max's eyes flickered toward Marissa, then back to Sarah. Yes, ma'am. And are you happy? Another pause. This one longer. Marissa's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Max, honey, the nice lady asked you a question, she said sweetly. I'm happy, Max whispered. But Caleb, watching from outside, saw his son's hands trembling, saw the way he pressed himself against Lily's side, saw the truth beneath the carefully constructed lie. And he saw David notice it too. The investigator's eyes sharpened slightly, and he made a note on his tablet. Sarah turned to Marissa. We'd like to speak with the children privately, if you don't mind. Marissa's smile never wavered. Of course. Whatever you need. I want to be completely transparent. She stood and left the room, but Caleb noticed the way her hands clenched at her sides, the way her jaw tightened as she walked past the window. The moment she was gone, Sarah's voice became gentler. Lily, Max, you're not in any trouble. We just want to make sure you're okay. Can you tell me, how does Ms. Cole treat you? Lily's careful composure cracked slightly. She takes care of us. Does she ever get angry with you? Sometimes, when we make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? If we're too loud, or if we don't do our lessons right, or if we ask for things we're not supposed to ask for. And what happens when she gets angry? Lily's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She sends us to our rooms, or she doesn't let us eat, or she tells us we're being difficult and ungrateful. David was writing quickly now. Max, is that true? Does Ms. Cole not let you eat sometimes? Max nodded, his eyes filling with tears. How often does that happen? I don't know. A lot. And has she ever hurt you, physically? Both children shook their heads. But she scares you, Sarah asked softly. This time, both children nodded. Sarah and David exchanged a look. Then Sarah reached out and gently touched Lily's hand. Thank you for being honest with us. You're very brave. We're going to talk to some other people in the house now, okay? But I want you to know that we're here to help. The children were dismissed and left the room quickly, their steps almost running. Caleb watched them go, his heart breaking and soaring at the same time. They'd told the truth. Despite their fear, despite the pressure, they'd told the truth. Now the investigators just needed to hear it from one more person. Elena was called down next. She entered the living room with her shoulders back and her chin up, and Caleb recognized the look on her face. It was the same expression he'd seen when she stepped between Max and Marissa's cruelty. It was the look of someone who'd decided that enough was enough. Ms. Cruz, thank you for speaking with us, Sarah began. How long have you worked in this household? 2 years. And in that time, have you observed any concerning behavior from Ms. Cole toward the children? Elena took a deep breath. Then she pulled out the business card Caleb had given her and set it on the table. Before I answer that, I need to know, if I tell you the truth, will I be protected? Will my job be safe? Will my visa be safe? Sarah picked up the card and read it. Her eyebrows rose slightly. This is Mr. Monroe's personal attorney. Yes. Someone gave it to me this morning and told me that if I told the truth, I'd be protected. Who gave it to you? I don't know his real name, but I know he cares about those children. Elena's voice strengthened. And so do I. So yes, I've observed concerning behavior. I've observed it every single day since Mr. Monroe left. For the next 20 minutes, Elena told them everything. The control, the manipulation, the psychological abuse, the threats. The way Marissa starved the children of food and affection and safety. The way she made them afraid to speak, to laugh, to be children. She told them about Max being punished for nightmares, about Lily being forced to redo schoolwork until she cried, about the small portions and the long isolations and the constant grinding cruelty disguised as discipline. And she told them about this morning's threat, how Marissa had tried to silence her with intimidation and lies. Sarah and David listened to every word, their expressions growing more serious with each revelation. Ms. Cruz, are you willing to put all of this in a formal statement? David asked. Yes. And you understand that Ms. Cole may retaliate against you. Let her try. Elena's eyes were fierce. Those children have been suffering for months while everyone looked the other way. I'm not looking away anymore. We'll need to speak with Ms. Cole again, Sarah said, and we may need to remove the children from the home temporarily while we investigate. Please do. Please get them out of here today. The investigators stood. Sarah touched Elena's shoulder briefly. Thank you. What you've done today took real courage. Elena just nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. The investigators asked to speak with Marissa again. She entered the living room with her smile still in place, but Caleb could see the strain around her eyes, the tightness in her movements. Ms. Cole, we've completed our preliminary interviews, Sarah began, and we have some concerns. Marissa's smile faltered. Concerns? About what? About the children's emotional well-being, about the household environment, about certain disciplinary practices that have been described to us. Described by whom? By Elena? Marissa's voice sharpened. That woman has been trying to undermine me since the day I started setting proper boundaries with the children. She's bitter and jealous, and Ms. Cole. The concerns weren't just from Ms. Cruz. The children themselves described feeling afraid and controlled. They're children. They don't understand the difference between discipline and abuse. I've been trying to teach them structure, responsibility. By withholding food, Marissa went very still. That's a lie. Is it? Because both children independently mentioned being sent to bed without dinner as a regular punishment. They're exaggerating. Children always exaggerate. And what about the isolation, the emotional manipulation, the threats? Marissa's composure was cracking now, her voice rising. I have done nothing but sacrifice for those children. I gave up my own career, my own life, to be here when their father couldn't be bothered to come home. And this is what I get? Accusations, investigations. Ms. Cole, I need you to calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. This is my house. Those are my children, and you have no right. Actually, they're not your children, David interrupted quietly. They're Mr. Monroe's children, and he has every right to ensure their safety. Marissa's face went white, then red. Caleb did this. He sent you here to make me look bad because he's a coward who can't face his own failures as a father. Ms. Cole, get out! Get out of my house right now! We're not leaving without the children. And that was when Marissa finally snapped. You're not taking them anywhere. She was shouting now, her carefully crafted mask completely shattered. I've worked too hard, given up too much to have everything destroyed by a man who doesn't even care enough to show up. The investigators stood. Ms. Cole, we're going to need you to step back. But Marissa was beyond listening. She grabbed a crystal vase from the side table and threw it across the room, where it shattered against the wall. Those children are mine. I've earned them, and I'm not letting anyone take them away from me. Outside the window, Caleb stood up from his crouched position, his heart racing. This was it. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. He pulled off his baseball cap, stripped off the work gloves, walked toward the front entrance with steady, determined steps. It was time for the gardener to disappear, and for the father to come home. The sound of shattering crystals still echoed through the house when Caleb pushed open the front door. He didn't knock. He didn't hesitate. He simply walked into his own home with the quiet authority of a man who'd finally stopped hiding. The investigators turned toward the sound, their hands already moving toward their phones. Marissa spun around, her face flushed with rage, another vase gripped in her trembling hands. Her eyes widened when she saw him standing in the doorway. This man in dirt-stained work clothes, his face obscured by weeks of beard growth, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her take an involuntary step backward. Who the hell are you? She demanded. This is a private residence. You can't just... Caleb reached up and pulled off the baseball cap he'd worn for days. He straightened his shoulders, letting the hunched posture of Carl Briggs fall away. He met her eyes directly, and in that moment, recognition flickered across her face like lightning before a storm. Hello, Marissa. The vase slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. The color drained from her face so completely she looked like a ghost. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Sarah, the lead investigator, looked between them with sharp, assessing eyes. Mr. Monroe. Yes. Caleb's voice was steady, controlled, though every muscle in his body was coiled tight. I'm Caleb Monroe. I own this house. And those are my children you're here to protect. Marissa's voice came out as a rasp. She cleared her throat and tried again. You're supposed to be in Dubai. You're supposed to be... I've been here for 5 days, working in the garden, watching, recording, witnessing every single thing you've done to my children. The words landed like physical blows. Marissa grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself, her knuckles going white. You've been spying on me? How dare you? How dare you come into this house under false pretenses and... How dare I? Caleb's voice rose for the first time, raw and furious. How dare you? How dare you take my children, and turn their home into a prison? How dare you starve them and threaten them and break them down piece by piece while I trusted you to keep them safe? I was keeping them safe. I was giving them structure and discipline and everything you were too weak to provide. You were torturing them. The words ripped out of Caleb's throat. You were using your power over vulnerable kids to feed your own need for control, and you called it love. David, the male investigator, stepped forward with his hands raised. Mr. Monroe, I need you to take a breath. Miss Cole, you need to step back. Everyone needs to calm down so we can... But Marissa wasn't listening. She was staring at Caleb like he'd betrayed her in the deepest possible way, her eyes wild with hurt and fury. I gave up everything for you. For them. I put my career on hold, my entire life on hold, to be here when you couldn't be. I did the hard work of actually raising your children while you chased money and glory around the world. And this is what I get? You sneaking around like a criminal, gathering evidence against me like I'm some kind of monster? You are a monster. Caleb's voice went cold and quiet. You just hid it well until you thought no one was watching. I am not... Marissa's voice cracked. I love those children. Everything I did was to make them better, stronger, more prepared for the real world. You don't love them. You don't even see them as people. You see them as objects to control, to shape into whatever perfect image you have in your head. Caleb pulled his phone from his pocket. But you want to know what real love looks like. Real love is a housemaid who risked her job and her safety to stand between you and two scared kids. Real love is making sure children feel safe before you make them obedient. Real love doesn't need threats and fear to function. He turned to the investigators. I have 5 days of audio recordings, photographs, video evidence, notes documenting every instance of emotional abuse, manipulation, and psychological torture. I've documented her threatening my staff, controlling my children's food intake, isolating them as punishment, and telling my 6-year-old son that his father doesn't love him. Sarah's expression hardened. Mr. Monroe, we'll need access to all of that evidence. You'll have it within the hour. My attorney is already preparing the files. Caleb's eyes never left Marissa. I also have evidence of her meeting with a family law attorney 2 days ago, signing documents that I'm guessing were either custody agreements or some kind of guardianship paperwork, all without my knowledge or consent. Marissa's face went ashen. That's not... I was just protecting their interests in case something happened to you. You travel constantly. You're always in dangerous places. Someone needed to think about their future. You were trying to cut me out of their lives permanently. Caleb's voice was steel. You were building a legal framework to claim guardianship, probably planning to argue that I was an unfit parent because of my absence. You saw an opportunity and you took it. That's not true. Then explain the documents you signed. Explain why you told my attorney yesterday that you had full authority here. Explain why you threatened to have Elena deported if she told anyone the truth about what you've been doing. Marissa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The fight was draining out of her, replaced by something that looked almost like desperation. I was trying to help them, she whispered. You weren't here. Someone had to make the hard choices. Hard choices? Caleb's laugh was bitter. You want to talk about hard choices? Let me tell you about hard choices. A hard choice is working 18-hour days in a garden you own, pretending to be someone else, just so you can see the truth about what's happening to your kids. A hard choice is not running to your children the moment you see them suffering because you know you need evidence that will hold up in court. A hard choice is watching a woman you loved turn into someone you don't recognize and having to face the fact that you were too blind to see it happening. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You wanted a family, but you didn't want the messy, complicated reality of it. You wanted obedient little dolls who would reflect well on you and make you feel powerful. And when they didn't perform perfectly, you punished them for being human. Footsteps sounded on the stairs. Everyone turned to see Elena standing at the landing with Lily and Max. The children's eyes were wide, uncertain. They looked at Caleb, this strange bearded man in dirty work clothes who was shouting at Marissa, and confusion flickered across their faces. Then Max tilted his head slightly, studying Caleb's face. His eyes, those same blue eyes that Caleb saw in the mirror every morning, went wide. Daddy? The word came out as barely a whisper, and just like that, everything else fell away. The investigators, Marissa, the evidence, the anger, all of it became background noise as Caleb looked at his son and felt his heart shatter and rebuild itself in the same moment. Yeah, buddy. Caleb's voice broke. It's me. Max dropped his stuffed bear and ran. He flew down the stairs and across the living room and crashed into Caleb's arms with enough force to make them both stumble. Caleb caught him, lifting him up, holding him tight, while Max wrapped his arms around his neck and buried his face in Caleb's shoulder. "You came back," Max sobbed. "You came back. You came back. You came back." "I'm here. I'm right here. I've got you." Caleb pressed his face into Max's hair, breathing in the familiar smell of his son, feeling the small body shake with sobs. "I'm so sorry I was gone. I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening, but I'm here now, and I'm not leaving again." Lily stood frozen on the stairs, her face pale, her hands clutched together in front of her. She looked at Caleb, at Max crying in his arms, at Marissa standing rigid and silent near the shattered vase. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't move. Caleb extended one arm toward her. "Lily, sweetheart, come here." She shook her head just slightly. "You were here the whole time? You were the gardener?" "Yes." "You were watching us?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you just come get us?" Her voice cracked on the last word, and Caleb saw the hurt there, the feeling of betrayal that even at 9 years old she understood too well. "Because I needed proof. I needed to make sure that when I got you out, you'd stay out. That she," he gestured toward Marissa without looking at her, "could never hurt you again." "But we were scared." Lily's tears spilled over. "We were so scared, and you were right there, and you didn't help us." The words cut deeper than any knife could. Caleb felt them lodge in his chest, felt the weight of his daughter's pain and confusion and betrayal settle on his shoulders like stones. "You're right, and I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry." He knelt down, still holding Max, and looked up at Lily. "I made a choice, and maybe it was the wrong one. Maybe I should have just grabbed you both and run the first day, but I was terrified that if I did that, the courts would send you back to her. So I waited, and I watched, and I gathered proof, and every second of it felt like dying." Lily stood on the stairs, trembling, her face twisted with emotion. Then Elena gently touched her shoulder. "Your daddy loves you," Elena said softly. "He's been trying to protect you the only way he knew how, and so have I. But now he's here, and it's going to be okay." Lily looked at Elena, then back at Caleb. Something in her face shifted, some decision made, some wall coming down. She walked slowly down the stairs and across the room. When she reached Caleb, she didn't run into his arms like Max had. She just stood there, looking up at him with those serious, hurt, hopeful eyes. "Promise you won't leave again?" "I promise." "Promise you won't let her hurt us anymore?" "I promise." "Promise you'll stay even when things get hard?" "I promise, Lily. I promise on everything I am." Caleb shifted Max to one arm and pulled Lily close with the other. She leaned against him stiffly at first. Then all at once she collapsed into him, her small arms wrapping around his waist, her face pressed against his chest. They stood there, father and children, reunited in the ruins of what should have been their home, while the investigators watched quietly and Marissa stood frozen in place, her face a mask of devastation. Finally, Sarah cleared her throat gently. "Mr. Monroe, we still need to complete our investigation, but given what we've seen and heard today, we're recommending immediate temporary removal of guardianship from Ms. Cole." Caleb looked up, his arms still wrapped around his children. "What does that mean?" "It means she'll be barred from contact with the children while we complete our assessment. It means you'll need to stay in town and be available for further interviews. And it means we'll be forwarding our findings to law enforcement for potential criminal charges related to child endangerment and emotional abuse." Marissa made a sound like she'd been punched. "Criminal charges? You can't. I never hurt them. I never laid a hand on them." "Physical abuse isn't the only kind of abuse, Ms. Cole." David's voice was hard. "And based on what we've heard today, there's more than enough evidence to warrant further investigation." "This is insane. Caleb, tell them. Tell them I was just trying to help. Tell them you understand that I was doing my best." Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since he'd walked into the room. He saw the desperation in her eyes, the genuine belief that she'd done nothing wrong. And he felt something close to pity, though it was buried under layers of anger and betrayal. "I believed you when you said you'd take care of them. I trusted you with the most precious things in my life. And you destroyed that trust so completely that I had to disguise myself as a stranger just to see the truth." His voice was quiet, but firm. "I don't care if you thought you were helping. I don't care if you convinced yourself that cruelty was somehow love. What you did to my children was inexcusable, and I will never, ever forgive you for it." Marissa's face crumpled. She sank into the chair behind her, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking. "I loved you. I loved all of you. I gave up everything. You gave up nothing." Caleb's voice cut through her sobs. "You saw an opportunity to play house with a ready-made family and unlimited resources. You saw a chance to mold children into perfect little reflections of your ego, but you never loved them. Because love doesn't feel like fear. Love doesn't leave bruises on the soul. Love doesn't make children afraid to breathe too loud or ask for what they need." He turned to the investigators. "What do you need from me right now?" Sarah pulled out a business card. "We need those recordings and any other evidence you've collected. We'll need a formal statement from you, from Ms. Cruz, and eventually from the children when they're ready. And we'll need you to remain in the area while we process everything." "Done. All of it." Caleb looked down at his children, who were both clinging to him like they were afraid he might disappear if they let go. "Can I take them out of this house today?" "Yes. In fact, we recommend it. Give them some space to decompress while we complete our work here." "Thank you." Caleb looked at Elena, who was still standing on the stairs, her eyes red but her chin high. "Elena, can you pack some clothes and essentials for the kids? Whatever they'll need for a few days?" "Of course." She started up the stairs, then paused and looked back. "Mr. Monroe, I'm glad you're home. Thank you for protecting them when I couldn't." Elena nodded and disappeared upstairs. Marissa lifted her head from her hands. Her makeup was ruined, her face blotchy and swollen. "Caleb, please, don't do this. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can set better boundaries. We can—" "There is no we anymore, Marissa. There's just you facing consequences for your actions and me rebuilding what you tried to destroy." "But I love you. I've always loved you." "No, you loved the idea of me, the successful businessman who was never around to interfere with your plans. You loved my money and my status and the lifestyle it provided, but you never loved me enough to respect my children." He shifted both kids in his arms, holding them tighter. "I want you out of this house by tomorrow. Take whatever personal belongings are yours and nothing else. My attorney will be in touch about the rest." "This isn't fair." "Fair?" Caleb's voice rose again. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would be you facing the same fear you put my kids through. Fair would be you spending every day wondering when the next punishment would come, when the next meal would be withheld, when the next reminder that you're not good enough would land. But instead, you get to walk away with your freedom and your dignity intact. So don't talk to me about fair." David stepped forward. "Ms. Cole, we need you to come with us to the office to provide a formal statement. You're not under arrest, but we do need your cooperation." Marissa stood slowly, her movements mechanical. She looked at the children one last time, and Caleb saw something flicker in her expression. Regret, maybe, or grief, or just the realization that she'd lost something she couldn't get back. "Goodbye, Lily." "Goodbye, Max?" Her voice was hollow. "I'm sorry you couldn't see that everything I did was for your own good." Lily turned her face into Caleb's shirt, refusing to look at her. Max didn't respond at all. The investigators escorted Marissa toward the door. She walked like someone in a dream, her steps uncertain, her eyes unfocused. Just before she left, she turned back one more time. "I hope you know what you're doing, Caleb. Those children need structure. They need discipline. Without it, they'll be fine, because they'll have what they actually need: safety, stability, and a father who puts them first." Caleb's voice was final. "Goodbye, Marissa." She opened her mouth like she wanted to say more, but David gently guided her out the door. It closed behind them with a soft click, and suddenly the house was quiet, except for Max's gradually calming sobs and the sound of Elena moving around upstairs. Caleb stood in the middle of the living room, holding his children, surrounded by broken crystal and shattered illusions. His legs were shaking from the adrenaline, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. But his arms were steady as they held his kids close. "Daddy?" Max's voice was muffled against his shoulder. Yeah, buddy? Are we really safe now? Caleb closed his eyes and felt tears burn behind his eyelids. Yeah, we're really safe now. And she's not coming back? No, she's not coming back. Promise? I promise. Lily pulled back just enough to look up at him. Her eyes were red and puffy, her face streaked with tears, but there was something else there too, something that looked almost like hope. Where are we going to go? Somewhere else, somewhere better, somewhere that feels like home. Caleb brushed her hair back from her face. What do you think about that? I think, Lily's voice caught. I think I want to go somewhere that doesn't have any rules about how loud we can talk, or how much we can eat, or how many mistakes we're allowed to make. Then that's exactly where we'll go. Elena appeared at the top of the stairs with 2 small suitcases. She carried them down and set them by the door, then stood there with her arms crossed, her expression carefully neutral. I packed a week's worth of clothes and their favorite things. Lily's books, Max's art supplies, some photos from before. She stopped, swallowing hard. Before everything changed. Thank you, Elena, for everything. I mean it. Caleb shifted the children slightly so he could look at her properly. I'm going to make sure Marissa's threats against you don't go anywhere. My attorney will handle your visa situation, your employment situation, all of it. And if you want to continue working for us, in whatever capacity feels right, I'd be honored to have you. Elena's eyes filled with tears. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. You stood between my kids and harm when no one else would. That's not something I take lightly. He paused. But more than that, they love you and they trust you. And right now, they need people around them who they can trust. Lily reached out and took Elena's hand. Please don't leave us too. Elena looked down at the small hand in hers, and something in her face softened. I'm not leaving. Not unless you want me to. We don't want you to. Max's voice was firm despite the tears still clinging to his lashes. Then I'm staying. Caleb set the children down gently, though they both stayed close, their hands clutching his clothes. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call to Michael. It's done. Family Services was here. They have preliminary statements from Elena and the kids. Marissa's been removed from the house and is being questioned downtown. I need you to send everything we have, all the recordings, all the notes, all the evidence, to the lead investigator. Her name is Sarah Mitchell. He listened for a moment. Yeah, I'm okay. The kids are okay. We're getting out of here. Another pause. Tomorrow. We'll talk about next steps tomorrow. Right now, I just need to get them somewhere safe where they can breathe. He ended the call and looked around the living room, this space that should have been filled with warmth and laughter, but had instead become a stage for control and fear. He saw Max's stuffed bear lying forgotten on the floor where he'd dropped it. He saw the pieces of broken crystal glinting in the afternoon light. He saw the chair where Marissa had sat, playing the gracious guardian right up until the moment her mask had finally shattered. Come on, he said to his children. Let's go. Lily picked up her suitcase. Max grabbed his bear and Caleb's hand simultaneously. Elena took the other suitcase and followed them to the door. They walked out together, father, children, and the woman who'd protected them, leaving behind the mansion that had been a prison and stepping into the uncertain freedom of whatever came next. As they reached Caleb's truck, Max tugged on his hand. Daddy? Yeah? When you were the gardener, did you hear me crying at night? Caleb's throat closed up. He knelt down so he was eye level with his son. Yeah, buddy, I heard you. And it made you sad? It made me sadder than I've ever been in my whole life. But you stayed anyway? You kept working in the garden, even though it made you sad? I stayed because I love you. And sometimes love means doing hard things so that the people you love can be safe. Caleb cupped Max's face gently. I know you don't understand everything that happened, and that's okay. You don't have to understand it all right now, but I need you to know that every second I was in that garden, I was thinking about you and Lily, every single second. Max considered this, his small face serious. Then he threw his arms around Caleb's neck again. I'm glad you came back. Me too, buddy. Me too. They drove away from the estate as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Caleb didn't look in the rearview mirror. He didn't need to see the mansion growing smaller behind them. His eyes were focused forward, on the road ahead, on the hotel where they'd spend the night before figuring out what came next. In the back seat, Lily and Max sat pressed against each other, holding hands, their eyes wide and watchful, but no longer afraid. Elena sat beside them, her presence steady and reassuring. And for the first time in months, Caleb felt like he could breathe. They stopped at a small hotel on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, but clean and quiet. Caleb got them 2 adjoining rooms, and Elena helped the children settle in while he went back down to the lobby to make more calls. To his lawyer. To a child psychologist his attorney recommended. To his business partners, explaining that he'd be taking an extended leave of absence. When he finally came back upstairs, he found all 3 of them in one room, sitting together on the bed. Elena was reading aloud from one of Lily's books while Max leaned against her side, and Lily sat cross-legged nearby, listening intently. They looked up when he entered, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then Lily said, "Elena was just getting to the good part, the part where the princess decides she doesn't need rescuing because she can rescue herself." Caleb smiled, the first real smile he'd felt in days. "Sounds like a good story." "It is." Lily patted the bed beside her. "Want to hear the rest?" Caleb sat down, and Max immediately crawled into his lap. Lily leaned against his shoulder. Elena continued reading, her voice steady and warm, and they all listened to the story of a girl who learned that she was stronger than she knew. Outside, the sun set and the stars came out. Inside, in a hotel room that cost less than what Caleb usually spent on coffee, a family began the long, slow process of healing. It wouldn't be easy. There would be therapy sessions and difficult conversations and moments when the fear crept back in. There would be questions Caleb couldn't answer and pain he couldn't fix with money or power or good intentions. But for tonight, they had this: 4 people who'd survived something terrible and found each other on the other side. 4 people who'd learned that protection sometimes looked like a housemaid's quiet courage, that love sometimes required disguise and sacrifice, and that home wasn't a mansion or a title or a perfect facade. Home was wherever the people you loved felt safe enough to cry, to laugh, to breathe, to be human. And finally, after months of fear and weeks of deception and days of gathering evidence, they were home. That night, Caleb barely slept. He lay awake in the darkness of the hotel room, listening to the rhythm of his children's breathing in the adjoining room, the sound carried through the open connecting door. Every few hours, he'd get up and check on them. Max curled around his bear, Lily sprawled across her bed with one arm flung over her head, both of them finally sleeping without fear. Elena had taken the couch in their room, insisting she wanted to be nearby in case they woke up frightened or confused. Each time Caleb looked at them, he felt the weight of the past months settle heavier on his shoulders. He'd gotten them out. He'd stopped Marissa. He'd gathered the evidence that would ensure she never had power over them again. But he couldn't erase what they'd already endured. He couldn't give them back the weeks of fear and hunger and loneliness. He could only move forward and hope that forward was enough. Around 3 a.m, his phone buzzed with a text from Michael. The message was brief but significant. Family Services filed emergency protection order. Marissa barred from all contact. Criminal investigation opened. Need to meet tomorrow to discuss custody formalization and next steps. Caleb typed back, "Thank you. We'll call in the morning." He set down the phone and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot below. A few cars sat scattered across the asphalt, their paint gleaming under the streetlights. Normal people doing normal things, traveling for work, visiting family, just passing through on their way to somewhere else. He envied them the simplicity of it. Behind him, he heard a small sound. He turned to find Max standing in the doorway of the connecting room, his bear dragging on the floor, his eyes wide and uncertain in the dim light. "Hey, buddy, can't sleep?" Max shook his head and walked over, climbing into Caleb's lap when he sat down in the armchair by the window. The boy was warm and solid, real in a way that made Caleb's throat tighten. "I had a bad dream," Max whispered. "About what?" "About her coming back. About you being the gardener again, and not my daddy." Max's fingers twisted in Caleb's shirt. "What if she comes and takes us away? What if the people with the tablets decide we have to go back?" Caleb wrapped his arms around his son, feeling the small body trembling against his chest. "That's not going to happen. The investigators saw what she was doing. They heard what she said, and they're not going to let her anywhere near you. But what if they don't believe us? What if they think we're making it up? I have proof, Max. Hours and hours of recordings, pictures, notes, everything I saw and heard while I was working in the garden. And Elena told them the truth about everything she witnessed. They believe us because the evidence is real. Max was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then he said, "Why did she do it? Why was she so mean?" It was the question Caleb had been asking himself since the moment he'd realized what was happening. He'd turned it over and over in his mind, trying to understand how someone he'd cared about could transform into someone capable of such calculated cruelty. "I think she wanted control more than she wanted love," Caleb said carefully. "I think she saw you and Lily as things she could shape instead of people she should cherish. And I think when I wasn't around to see what she was really like, she let that need for control take over everything else." "Did you love her?" "I thought I did, but I didn't really know her. I knew the person she pretended to be when I was around. I didn't know the person she became when she thought no one was watching." Caleb pressed his cheek against Max's hair. "That's on me. I should have looked harder. I should have asked more questions. I should have come home sooner. You're home now." "Yeah, and I'm not leaving again, not for business, not for anything. From now on, wherever you and Lily are, that's where I'll be." Max pulled back to look at Caleb's face. "What about your work? Don't you have to travel and do important things?" "You and Lily are the important things. Everything else is just details." Caleb smoothed Max's rumpled hair. "I'm going to restructure my whole life. Maybe I'll sell some of the companies. Maybe I'll work remotely. Maybe I'll just step back and let other people run things for a while. Whatever it takes to make sure you know that you're my priority." "What if we mess up? What if we're not good enough?" The question hit Caleb like a fist to the chest. This was what Marissa had done. She'd convinced his children that love was something they had to earn through perfect behavior, that one mistake could cost them everything. "Max, listen to me. Really listen." Caleb waited until Max's eyes met his. "You don't have to be good enough. You already are enough just by being you. You could mess up every single day for the rest of your life, and I would still love you exactly the same. That's what real love is. It doesn't come with conditions or rules or punishments. It just is." Elena said that too. She said we were good kids even when we made mistakes. Elena was right. She was right about a lot of things. Caleb held Max tighter. "She saw what was happening and she stayed to protect you. That took real courage. Are you going to marry her instead?" The question caught Caleb completely off guard. "What? No, why would you think that?" "Because she's nice to us, and she doesn't yell, and she makes sure we have enough to eat." Max shrugged. "I thought maybe that's what you look for." Caleb felt his heart crack open a little wider. His 6-year-old son had already learned to measure love by absence of harm rather than presence of joy. That was going to take time to unlearn. "I'm not looking for anyone right now, buddy. Right now, I'm just focusing on being your dad and making sure you and Lily are okay. Maybe someday, a long time from now, I'll meet someone who treats all of us with kindness and respect. But that's not something you need to worry about." "Okay." Max yawned, his eyelids drooping. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you were the gardener, even though it was scary and confusing, because if you hadn't been, maybe we'd still be there." Caleb closed his eyes against the burn of tears. "Me too, Max. Me too." He carried his son back to bed, tucked him in next to his bear, and watched until Max's breathing evened out into sleep. Then he returned to his own room and finally let himself cry. Morning came with pale sunlight filtering through the curtains, and the sound of Lily's voice in the next room asking Elena if they could order pancakes for breakfast. Caleb showered and shaved for the first time in a week, watching his familiar face emerge from beneath the beard he'd grown for his disguise. He looked older, he thought, worn, but there was something different in his eyes too, a clarity that hadn't been there before. They ate breakfast together in the hotel restaurant, pancakes and eggs and fruit, with Max eating seconds and thirds without anyone telling him to stop. Lily laughed at something Elena said, a real laugh that sounded rusty from disuse but genuine. Caleb watched them and felt something loosen in his chest. At 9 o'clock, Michael arrived. He was carrying a briefcase and wearing his lawyer face, but his expression softened when he saw the children. "Can we talk?" he asked Caleb quietly. They stepped outside while Elena stayed with Lily and Max. The morning air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of rain from somewhere in the distance. "Family Services completed their initial assessment," Michael began. "They're recommending full custody be restored to you with supervised visitation rights for Marissa pending the outcome of the criminal investigation." "She's not getting visitation, not supervised, not unsupervised, not anything." "Caleb, legally she has rights as what?" "She was never their legal guardian. She was my fiancée who I trusted to help care for them while I traveled. She has no legal standing." Caleb's voice was hard. "And after what she did, she doesn't deserve the courtesy of seeing them again." Michael was quiet for a moment. "The criminal investigation is moving forward. The DA is taking the case seriously based on the evidence you provided and the statements from Elena and the children. They're considering charges of child endangerment, emotional abuse, and criminal menacing based on her threats against Elena." "What's the timeline?" "Could be weeks before they decide whether to formally charge her. Could be months before it goes to trial, if it gets that far." Michael pulled a folder from his briefcase. "In the meantime, I need you to sign some paperwork. We're filing for an emergency restraining order that will keep her away from you and the kids. We're also going to need to address the house. She has some personal property there that she's entitled to retrieve, but it needs to happen under supervision." "Fine. Whatever it takes to make sure she can't hurt them anymore." "There's something else." Michael hesitated. "She's been calling my office. Multiple times. She wants to talk to you." "No." "She says she has things she needs to explain, that there's more to the story than what you saw." "I saw enough. I saw her terrorize my children. I saw her threaten someone who tried to protect them. I saw her lose control and show exactly who she really is." Caleb shook his head. "Whatever she wants to say, I don't need to hear it." "Understood. I'll let her attorney know that all communication needs to go through me." Michael handed over the folder. "Sign these and we'll get the restraining order filed today." Caleb flipped through the documents, scanning the legal language that would put a wall between Marissa and his family. He signed each page with sharp, decisive strokes. "What about the kids?" he asked as he handed the folder back. "Do they have to testify or make statements or anything like that?" "The investigators already have preliminary statements from them. If the case goes to trial, they might need to testify, but that would be a last resort. The DA will try to build the case on your recordings, Elena's testimony, and the professional assessments." Michael put the folder back in his briefcase. "Speaking of which, I've set up appointments with a child psychologist for both Lily and Max. Dr. Sarah Chen, she specializes in trauma recovery for kids. First appointment is tomorrow afternoon if you're available." "We'll be there." "Good. And Caleb?" Michael put a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing. It took guts to go undercover like that, to watch and wait, instead of just storming in. I know it was hard, but you got them out the right way. The right way would have been not letting it happen at all. You can't blame yourself for trusting someone you cared about. Marissa fooled everyone. She was charming, capable, seemed genuinely devoted to the kids. How were you supposed to know she'd turn into someone else the moment you left?" "I should have known. I should have seen the signs. Maybe. Or maybe she's just really good at hiding who she is." Michael squeezed his shoulder. "Either way, you saw the truth when it mattered, and you did something about it. That's what counts." They went back inside where Elena was helping the kids pack up their few belongings. Caleb watched them work together. Elena folding clothes while Lily organized books, and Max made sure his bear was properly situated in his backpack, and felt a wave of gratitude so strong it nearly knocked him over. "Elena," he said quietly, "can I talk to you for a minute?" She followed him to the hallway outside the rooms. She looked tired but steady, her dark eyes clear and direct. "I want to offer you a job," Caleb said. "A real one, with a proper contract and salary and benefits. Not as a housemaid, as a family manager or a nanny or whatever title feels right. Someone who helps me take care of the kids and helps them feel safe while we figure out what comes next." Elena crossed her arms, studying him carefully. "Why?" "Because they trust you. Because you protected them when I couldn't. Because you're good at this in a way I'm still learning to be. Caleb met her gaze. And because you deserve to be valued for what you do, not threatened for doing it. What about my visa situation? Marissa said she could make trouble. Michael's already handling it. Your visa is legitimate, and even if it wasn't, I have enough lawyers and resources to make sure you're protected. She can't touch you. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What happens when you meet someone new? When you decide you don't need me anymore? Then we'll figure it out together, with plenty of notice and a good severance package and recommendations that will get you any job you want. But Elena, I'm not looking to replace you. I'm looking to build a team of people who actually care about my kids. And you've already proven you're exactly the kind of person I need on that team." She looked past him toward the room where Lily and Max were, her expression softening. "They're good kids. They deserve better than what they've had." "I know. And with your help, that's what they'll get." Caleb extended his hand. "So what do you say? Will you stay with us?" Elena looked at his hand, then at his face. Then she took his hand and shook it firmly. "I'll stay, but I have conditions." "Name them." "First, I want Sundays off, real days off, not just take a break, but be on call days off." "Done." "Second, I want to be included in decisions about the kids' schedules and activities, not just told what to do, but actually consulted." "Absolutely." "Third, if you ever try to threaten me or manipulate me the way she did, I walk. Immediately. No matter what the contract says." Caleb's expression went serious. "I promise you, Elena, I will never treat you that way. You have my word." She nodded slowly. "Okay then, I'll take the job." "Thank you, truly." They went back into the room together, and Caleb told the children they'd be moving to a new place. Not the mansion, but somewhere fresh where they could start over. "Where?" Lily asked. "I don't know yet. Maybe a house by the water. Maybe something in the mountains. Maybe just a regular house in a regular neighborhood where you can ride bikes and play outside and be normal kids." Caleb crouched down to their level. "What matters is that it's ours, just ours, and it's a place where you feel safe. So I want you both to think about what would make you feel safe, and we'll find it together." "Can we have a dog?" Max asked hopefully. "If you want a dog, we'll get a dog." "Can I decorate my own room however I want?" Lily added, "even if the colors don't match?" "You can paint it rainbow polka dots if that makes you happy." Both children looked at him like he'd just promised them the moon. Then Max said, "Can we leave today? Can we go start looking right now?" Caleb laughed, the first real laugh he'd felt in weeks. "How about we start tomorrow? Today, let's just rest and spend time together. We've got all the time in the world to figure out what comes next." They spent the day doing simple, ordinary things. They went to a park where the children played on swings and climbed on playground equipment without anyone telling them to be careful or quiet. They ate lunch at a diner where Max ordered a chocolate milkshake and Lily got a burger with extra pickles, both of them eating without fear of judgment or restriction. They walked through a bookstore where Caleb let them each pick out 3 books without asking about reading levels or educational value. And slowly, gradually, Caleb watched his children start to relax. It was subtle at first. Lily's shoulders dropping from their perpetual hunch, Max's voice getting louder and more animated as he talked about a comic book he'd found. But by the end of the day, there were moments when they almost looked like normal, happy kids. That evening, back at the hotel, Caleb sat with both children on his bed while Elena ordered dinner for all of them. "I need to tell you something," Caleb said. "Tomorrow, we're going to meet with a doctor. Not a regular doctor, a special kind who helps kids who've been through hard things." Lily's face closed down immediately. "We're not sick." "I know, but sometimes when bad things happen, they leave marks we can't see, and this doctor helps people talk about those marks so they can heal." "What if we don't want to talk about it?" "Then you don't have to, not until you're ready, but I think it might help." Caleb took both their hands. "What Marissa did to you, the way she controlled you and scared you and made you feel small, that wasn't okay. And I want to make sure you have help processing all of it so it doesn't stay stuck inside you forever." "Are you going to talk to the doctor too?" Max asked. "If you want me to, yes." "About what?" About how I feel guilty for not seeing what was happening sooner. About how scared I was watching you both suffer and not being able to fix it right away. About how I'm going to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Caleb's voice was steady but gentle. We all went through something hard, and we're all going to need help dealing with it. There's no shame in that. Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Will the doctor make us go back there? To the house?" "No, never. That house isn't your home anymore. We're going to find a new home, and you'll never have to go back to that place again." "What about our stuff, our toys and clothes and everything?" "Elena and I will go get everything that's yours. You won't have to see Marissa, or the house, or anything that reminds you of what happened there." Caleb squeezed their hands. "I promise." Max leaned against him. "I miss my art stuff. The paints and the big paper and the easel Grandma gave me. We'll get all of it, and if anything's missing or broken, we'll replace it with something even better." "And my books?" Lily added. "I have a whole collection of. We'll get every single book. I'll make a complete inventory myself." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, just being close, until Elena knocked on the door with bags of Chinese takeout. They ate together on the beds, using the hotel room coffee table as a dining surface, sharing spring rolls and fried rice and sweet and sour chicken without anyone monitoring portions or criticizing choices. After dinner, Caleb read aloud from one of the books they'd bought at the bookstore, a silly adventure story about a family of raccoons who became pirates. He did all the voices, making Max giggle and even getting a smile from Lily. Elena listened from the armchair, occasionally adding her own commentary that made the story even funnier. When the children finally fell asleep, curled up on either side of Caleb with the book still open across his lap, Elena helped him move them to their own beds without waking them. "You're good at this," she said quietly as they stood in the doorway watching the kids sleep. "At what?" "Being their dad. Really being present with them. I should have been doing it all along. Maybe. But you're doing it now. That matters." Elena turned to look at him. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "That first day when you came to the garden as the new gardener, did you know then what you were going to find? Or were you hoping you were wrong?" Caleb thought about the investigator's report, about the growing dread in his gut as he'd read through the evidence, about the desperate hope that maybe it was all a misunderstanding. "I was hoping I was wrong. I was praying I was wrong. But I knew deep down that I wasn't." He looked at his children, at their peaceful, sleeping faces. "And part of me is glad I saw it with my own eyes. Because if I'd just relied on reports and secondhand information, I might have doubted. I might have thought I was overreacting. But watching it happen, hearing her voice, seeing their fear, there's no room for doubt anymore. And now we heal. However long it takes, whatever it costs, we heal." Caleb turned to Elena. "And thank you for everything you did for them. I know I keep saying it, but I need you to understand how much it meant. You could have walked away. Most people would have. But you stayed. They needed someone to stay. And Elena's voice caught. "I know what it's like to feel powerless and scared. I grew up in a house where my father controlled everything, where one wrong word could mean punishment. I swore when I left that I'd never let anyone do that to someone else if I had the power to stop it." "You stopped it. You really did." Elena nodded, brushing at her eyes. "Get some sleep, Mr. Monroe. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "Caleb, please, just Caleb." She smiled slightly. "Get some sleep, Caleb." The next afternoon, they met Dr. Sarah Chen at her office in a quiet building downtown. She was a small woman in her 40s with warm eyes and an easy smile, and she greeted the children like they were visiting friends rather than patients. Her office was nothing like a traditional doctor's space. Instead of an examination table and medical equipment, there were comfortable couches, shelves full of books and toys, and a large table covered with art supplies. One wall was entirely windows, letting in natural light that made everything feel open and safe. "So," Dr. Chen said after they'd all settled in, "I understand you've been through some difficult experiences lately, and I want you to know that this is a safe space where you can talk about anything you want or not talk at all if that's what feels right. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we draw or play, sometimes we just sit quietly. Whatever helps. Lily sat rigidly on the couch, her hands clasped in her lap. Are you going to ask us questions about her? Only if you want to answer them. I'm more interested in how you're feeling now and what you need to feel safe going forward. I feel confused, Lily admitted quietly, because part of me is glad she's gone, but part of me feels guilty for being glad. That makes a lot of sense. When someone treats us badly, it's normal to have complicated feelings about them, especially if we cared about them at some point. I thought I cared about her. In the beginning, she was nice. She played games with us and let us pick out movies and made us special treats. And then it just changed, and I don't know why. Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes people show us one version of themselves when they want us to trust them, and then they show a different version when they think they have control. It's not your fault that she changed, and it's not wrong to miss the version of her that was kind, even while being glad that you're safe from the version that was cruel. Max, who had been quiet, spoke up suddenly. Is my daddy going to change too? The question hung in the air like smoke. Caleb felt his heart constrict. Dr. Chen looked at Max with gentle understanding. That's a really important question, and it's scary to wonder if the people we love might hurt us. Can I ask, what makes you worried about that? Because Marissa changed, and if she can change from nice to mean, maybe anyone can. You're right that people can change, but there are different kinds of change. Some people change because they stop pretending to be something they're not. That's what happened with Marissa. She was always someone who needed control. She just hid it until she felt safe showing it. But other people change by growing and learning and becoming better versions of themselves. That's the kind of change your dad is trying to make. Max looked at Caleb uncertainly. How do I know which kind you are? Caleb's throat was tight, but he answered honestly. You don't. Not for sure. Not right away. All I can do is show you every single day that I'm choosing to be different. That I'm choosing to listen to you, to respect your feelings, to put your needs first. And over time, you'll see patterns. You'll see that I'm consistent, that I keep my promises, that I don't just say I love you, I show it. But what if you mess up? I will mess up. I guarantee it. I'll get frustrated sometimes, or make mistakes, or not understand what you need right away. But here's the difference. When I mess up, I'll apologize. I'll take responsibility. I'll try to do better next time. I won't blame you or make you feel small or pretend it didn't happen. Dr. Chen smiled. That's exactly right. Trust isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest when we're imperfect. They spent the rest of the session talking and drawing. Lily drew a picture of a house with flowers in the garden. Our new house, she explained, wherever that ends up being. Max created an elaborate painting of a family of superheroes, complete with capes and masks, each one labeled with a different power. When Dr. Chen asked what his power would be, he said, being brave enough to tell the truth. At the end of the hour, Dr. Chen pulled Caleb aside while the kids played with building blocks in the corner. They're going to need ongoing support, she said quietly. What they experienced was sustained psychological trauma. It's going to take time for them to rebuild their sense of safety and trust. Months, possibly years. Whatever they need, time, therapy, support, they'll have it. I'm also going to recommend some resources for you, because recovering from this kind of situation isn't just about the children healing, it's about the whole family system learning new patterns. She handed him a folder. There are support groups for parents, books on trauma-informed parenting, strategies for managing your own guilt and stress so it doesn't impact your ability to be present for them. Thank you. I'll use all of it. One more thing. Dr. Chen's expression grew more serious. At some point, they're going to test you. They're going to push boundaries and act out and see if you really meant what you said about unconditional love. That's normal. That's actually healthy. It means they're starting to feel safe enough to express their real feelings instead of just trying to be perfect. I'll be ready. I believe you will. The weeks that followed were hard in ways Caleb hadn't anticipated. He'd expected the children to be relieved, grateful, immediately happier now that they were free. Instead, they were angry and confused and sometimes deeply sad. Max had nightmares almost every night, waking up screaming for Elena or Caleb. Lily developed a stutter that only appeared when she was stressed. Both of them flinched at unexpected sounds and watched Caleb constantly, as if waiting for him to transform into someone they should fear. But slowly, with Dr. Chen's help and Elena's steady presence and Caleb's unwavering commitment to showing up every single day, things began to shift. Max's nightmares became less frequent. Lily's stutter faded. They started to laugh more, to argue over silly things like what to watch on TV or whose turn it was to pick the restaurant. Normal sibling conflicts that felt like victories. 3 weeks after leaving the hotel, they found a house. It wasn't grand or impressive like the mansion had been. It was a comfortable 2-story in a quiet neighborhood with a big backyard and windows that let in plenty of light. The first time the kids walked through it, Max ran straight to the yard and announced he wanted to build a tree house. Lily claimed the bedroom with the window seat where she could read and look out at the trees. "This feels right," she said quietly, standing in the empty room that would soon be hers. "It feels like it could be home." "Then it's ours," Caleb said. They moved in 2 weeks later. Elena helped them unpack and organize, turning the empty house into a space that felt lived in and warm. True to his promise, Caleb let the children decorate their rooms however they wanted. Max's became a riot of color with dinosaur posters and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Lily's was softer, with bookshelves lining every wall and a reading nook piled high with cushions. The day after they moved in, a lawyer delivered the news that Marissa had been formally charged with 4 counts of child endangerment and 1 count of criminal menacing. She'd pled not guilty and was preparing for trial, but the restraining order remained in effect. "She wants to make a statement," Michael told Caleb over the phone. "She says she deserves a chance to explain herself, to show that she's not the monster you've made her out to be. Let her explain it to a judge and jury. I'm done listening." "Understood. I'll convey that to her attorney." Caleb hung up and went to find his kids. They were in the backyard with Elena, planning where to plant a garden. Max wanted tomatoes. Lily wanted flowers. Elena was patiently explaining that they could have both. Caleb stood on the back porch watching them and felt something settle in his chest. This was what he'd been fighting for. This moment, this peace, this chance for his children to just be children again. That evening, after dinner, Max crawled into Caleb's lap while they were watching a movie. "Daddy?" "Yeah, buddy." "I'm not scared anymore. Not like I was before." Caleb's arms tightened around him. "I'm glad." "Elena says the scared feeling might come back sometimes, but that's okay because it doesn't mean I'm not safe. It just means my brain is still learning that things are different now." "Elena's right, and whenever you feel scared, you can tell me. Or tell Elena, or tell Lily. We're all here to help." "Okay." Max settled more comfortably against Caleb's chest. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Max, more than anything in the whole world." 6 months later, on a bright Saturday morning in early spring, Caleb stood in the backyard watching Lily and Max play with their new dog, a golden retriever puppy they'd named Captain. The treehouse was halfway built, a project Caleb was working on with Max every weekend, learning carpentry skills from YouTube videos and making plenty of mistakes that they laughed about together. Elena was in the garden, teaching Lily how to plant seedlings in the neat rows they'd prepared. The flowers were just starting to bloom, adding splashes of color to the green lawn. Michael's car pulled into the driveway, and Caleb met him at the front door. "It's over," Michael said without preamble. She took a plea deal. Guilty on 2 counts of child endangerment, probation, mandatory counseling, permanent restraining order preventing contact with minors. No jail time, but she'll have a record. Caleb absorbed this information, waiting for some surge of emotion, satisfaction, anger, vindication. Instead, he just felt tired. What about the civil case? She's agreed to surrender all claims to any relationship with the children and to cover their therapy costs for the next 5 years. In exchange, you've agreed not to pursue additional damages. Michael handed him a folder. "It's all here. You just need to sign." Caleb flipped through the documents, reading the legal language that would finally, officially, close this chapter. "Is she still in the area?" "No, she moved back east, staying with family while she completes her probation requirements. Her attorney says she understands that any attempt to contact you or the children will result in immediate arrest." "Good. How are the kids doing?" Caleb glanced toward the backyard where Max was throwing a ball for captain while Lily cheered them on. They're doing better, still working through things, still having hard days sometimes, but they're laughing again, playing again, being kids again. And you? I'm learning how to be present, how to listen, how to separate my guilt about what happened from my commitment to making things right. Caleb signed the final document and handed it back. Dr. Chen says healing isn't linear. Some days are better than others. But we're moving forward. Michael put a hand on his shoulder. You did good, Caleb. You saw a problem. You faced it head on, and you got your kids to safety. Not every father would have had the courage to do what you did. Not every father would have let it get that bad in the first place. Maybe. But you fixed it. That's what matters. After Michael left, Caleb walked back to the yard. Lily saw him coming and ran over, dirt on her hands and a huge smile on her face. Dad, look! The first tomato plant is flowering. Elena says we'll have actual tomatoes by summer. That's amazing, sweetheart. Max abandoned the puppy and joined them, breathless and happy. Can we work on the treehouse after lunch? I want to finish the ladder. Absolutely. But first, I think we need to give Captain a bath. He's covered in mud. Both children groaned dramatically, but they were smiling as they chased the puppy around the yard, their laughter ringing clear and bright in the spring air. Elena came over, pulling off her gardening gloves. They're really coming into their own, aren't they? They are. Thanks to you. Thanks to all of us. It takes a village, as they say. Speaking of which, Caleb hesitated, then continued, I've been thinking about expanding the village. Maybe enrolling them in school next fall instead of continuing with private tutors, letting them make friends, join clubs, be part of a community. That's a big step. I know, but I think they're ready, and I think I'm ready to trust other people to be part of their lives again. He looked at Elena. As long as I'm choosing those people carefully this time. Carefully is good. Trust but verify, as they say. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the children play. After a moment, Lily called out, Dad! Elena, come help us catch Captain. He's too fast. Caleb and Elena joined the chase, all of them running and laughing in the sunshine, covered in mud and dog slobber and pure, uncomplicated joy. That night, after the children were bathed and fed and tucked into bed, Caleb sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee, looking out at the yard. The treehouse stood half-finished against the old oak tree. The garden beds held neat rows of young plants just beginning to grow. The house behind him glowed with warm light from the windows. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard conversations to have, still wounds to heal, still moments when the past threatened to overshadow the present. But it was theirs, built on honesty and effort and the determination to do better, to be better, to create something real and lasting from the ashes of what had almost destroyed them. Caleb heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Lily standing in the doorway in her pajamas. Can't sleep? He asked. I wanted to ask you something. Sure. Come here. He patted the chair beside him, and she sat down, curling up with her feet tucked under her. Do you ever think about her? About Marissa? It was a question he'd been expecting, but still didn't quite know how to answer. Sometimes. Not as much as I used to. Do you miss her? I miss who I thought she was. But that person wasn't real. It was just a mask she wore to hide who she really was. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing this. I'm glad she's gone, but sometimes I feel bad for being glad. That's normal, Lily. It's okay to have complicated feelings about complicated situations. Dr. Chen says the same thing. Lily pulled her knees up to her chest. I just wanted to make sure you knew that I'm happy now, happier than I was before, even though sometimes I'm still scared or sad or confused. Caleb pulled her close, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. I know, sweetheart, and I'm happy too. Not because of what we went through, but because of what we survived. Because we're here, together, and we're going to be okay. Promise? I promise. They sat together on the porch as the stars came out one by one, father and daughter, survivors both, looking forward into a future that was uncertain, but theirs to build. Inside, Max slept peacefully with Captain curled at the foot of his bed. Elena was reading in her room, content in the knowledge that the family she'd fought to protect was finally truly safe. And somewhere far away, in a city where no one knew her story, Marissa Cole was learning to live with the consequences of her choices, carrying the weight of what she'd done to two innocent children and the father who'd loved her enough to trust her with them. But here, in this house with its half-built treehouse and flowering garden and rooms filled with laughter, that story was ending and a new one was beginning. A story about healing and trust and the kind of love that showed up every day, consistent and steady, proving itself not through grand gestures, but through small, faithful acts of presence and care. The gardener was gone. The children were safe. The father was home. And finally, after everything, they could begin to build the life they deserved. One honest moment, one kept promise, one day of showing up at a time. The end